All right, welcome to the stock market recap for Thursday, August 14th. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the action today of the indexes, liquid leaders, industry ETFs, then end the video with long and short setups going into tomorrow, like we do with every daily recap. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want my market takes throughout the trading day, along with a live stream at the market open, you can sign up for the Discord using the link below. All right, jumping into it, we had PPI inflation report came out today. Inflation came in much hotter than expected. And while I expected the market to sell off on that news, and we did get a gap down in the morning, for the most part, that gap down was accumulated once again and just shows that the market is extremely strong. Every kind of pullback is getting bought up, which is a good sign for now. QQQ, NASDAQ finished the day basically flat, down 0.08%, open right near the low of the day, kind of closed mid-range. There's a couple components that we'll cover in the industry ETFs, like software and cybersecurity, that are still acting pretty weak. But if we rotate to the S&P 500, which closed flat but much higher in the daily range, you can see that money is rotating still and staying in the market overall. This was the highest close and still over the 5-day moving average. So those two indexes still acting well. The growth stocks of the Russell 2000 had a pretty weak day, down 1.5% today. They had super strong action the last 2 days as CPI came in basically on target, a little bit lighter than expected. Uh, Unfortunately, with PPI coming in hotter than expected today, we did have that gap down because with hot inflation, the chance of a rate cut is a little bit less. I looked today though, and probability of a rate cut next meeting is still in the 90%. So overall, still bounced at the 5-day moving average, closed over that and the support gap on lighter volume. So I don't think it's too concerning just yet, but ideally we close today's gap down as quickly as possible. ARKK, similar kind of weakness, closed middle of the range after bouncing at the 5-day moving average. Still held part of that support gap. Looking for this to pull into the 20-day moving average is a higher low as this little base forms. And then taking a look at IBIT as a way to track Bitcoin, big reversal today, made new highs. Then right with that PPI report, we reversed and flushed all the way back down to the 20-day EMA on bigger volume. Not ideal action out of Bitcoin, so we'll keep an eye out for some of those stocks to potentially short. Next, we'll jump to the liquid leaders. We'll just sort this by price percent change today. And Reddit continues to be a monster stock. We weren't seeing many stocks that were gapping up on earnings. We definitely weren't seeing many stocks that were gapping up and continuing to be accumulated after earnings. And that's exactly what Reddit has done from 187, that closing, to a green line breakout yesterday into new all-time highs. And further strength today, up 3.6%, closing right near highs on good volume, just riding that 5-day EMA higher. Fortunately, I don't have any shares in this stock, but I will be looking for this stock to buy on any pullback, especially with the market. Robinhood up 1.9%. Perfect. Perfect little pullback into the support gap off that 20-day moving average. The only complaint that I have is it didn't undercut the support gap zone. That would have been like an A plus buy point. I did add a couple shares back later in the day because of that action, but this is going to be a stock on the long watch list going into tomorrow. MP, new closing highs today, continues to see volatility decrease while you're trading above the 5-day moving average. And after a big move like this from 18 to 76 is a really powerful thing. You don't tend to see volatility tighten while the stock stays over the 5-day moving average unless it is ready for a leg higher. So MP, great action, up 1.6% today. NVIDIA continues to just kind of churn at highs. A lot of semiconductors around NVIDIA are starting to break down. So maybe it's time for this to pull back and actually put in another base. My guess is this just chops until earnings and then chooses the direction from there. But really no momentum in the stock the last 2 or 3 weeks. Meta, this was newly added to the watch list or to the leaders list after that little breakout. Well, gap up on earnings, consolidated above the 5-day moving average, broke out on Tuesday, Little red day yesterday, and then today bouncing off the HVC, closing over the 5-day moving average. Really nice action to see. FUTU, another new addition to the list today. This is one of the leaders in China. I'd say TME and FUTU are the two leaders to track. FUTU is a little bit more liquid, even though relative strength wise, it's not as strong as TME. But really, really great action out of this. And I still think Chinese stocks, we'll cover that in the ETF list. I still think they have the best base in the market. Roblox, very close to getting this off the list. It does seem more and more like we got a big sell-off on earnings, came back, and then instead of like we did put in a couple higher lows here, but really just momentum waning. We couldn't get through the resistance gap. We couldn't get back through the HVC from that earnings close. We shook out to the 20-day and support gap yesterday. And typically, what you want to see out of a name when it does that is a push away from that area. It makes sense that it gapped down a little bit with the market, but this closed right on the low of the day, while some of the stocks in the market closed right near the high. The indexes closed pretty well. So I do think that this is losing momentum and could be replaced with AMD or BE. We'll keep this on watch to replace it. ALAB, little gap down today, still held the 5-day moving average and closed well. One of the stronger stocks in the market, in my opinion. And then Palantir, a little bit of weakness today. Lower highs, lower lows, closed under the support gap, which we had. I'll redraw it here with this little gap up zone. We closed under that today. Not ideal action, but really not doing anything wrong, still above the 10-day moving average. If we lost the HVC, that would be kind of concerning, and I would consider taking it off the leaders list, but we're not there yet. And then wanted to cover the two stocks that I took off the list. First one was DoorDash. As you can see, I haven't updated this chart, but we closed under the 20-day moving average with a gap down, open on the high, closed near the low. Just has seen distribution since that earnings gap up. Not ideal action there. The other stock I took off the leaders list was GEV. This has been one of the leaders in the kind of AI energy theme, and that group has just seemed very sluggish the last like 3 weeks. We've started to see a lot of stocks actually pull back, break down, lose the 50-day moving average. So I think this group, now that it's a consensus that AI just needs a ton of energy, and we've already priced a lot of that in, needs just another base before it actually has a clean uptrend. Now it's at a do or die spot right here, sitting on the 20-day EMA and the support gap. This could just be consolidation and we have like another move higher, but it is starting to feel sluggish. And there's some other stocks that I wanted to add with like Meta and FUTU. Jumping to the industry ETFs, let's sort this by price percent change today. Couple to highlight is XLF Financial ETF. Great action today. Opened basically flat, slightly down, but then closed at high of day over the 5, the 10, the 20, and the 50-day moving average. This is acting pretty well here. Semiconductors did finish up 0.2%, so heavily weighted with NVIDIA, while some of the stocks, VRT, CRDO, they're starting to see some distribution. So I think this theme is just kind of waiting for NVIDIA's earnings to come out before the next direction. XBI acted great today. I really thought with higher PPI coming in, we would see a gap down and flush, and I really didn't want to see that because I've got a pretty good sized position in LABU, which is the triple leveraged biotech ETF. And we did get that gap down, but instead of selling off, we opened on the low, closed back green, and just great accumulation action here after a day wedge popping through the 20-day moving average after getting supported at the 50, a gap up and closed through that 200-day moving average and previous resistance area. So think that this is just a theme to continue on as small caps. As long as the interest rates still are more probable to be cut, I think this is a group to focus on. Part of that reason is XL, where is it? XLY? No, sorry, one second. not XLP, XLV. Oh, right at the top. XLV up 0.5% today. This is the healthcare sector, and this has been acting super weak lately. But recently, we've started to see a little change of character. Not a ton, but we saw a gap up off the low, another gap up 2 days later, pushed through the 20-day moving average, and then great action today. And one thing that I want to go over is UNH, because it was announced that Berkshire Hathaway was taking a position in this. It's up 10% after hours. I think it's trading right around 300 or 297 at this point. But wanted to go through how this bottomed. We had obviously like a massive move down. We had a big rally up, but then further distribution, little rally to even the 10-day, followed it with a gap down, and then we saw an acceleration to the downside as volume picked up. So that's kind of your first sign that the stock could be bottoming. Does not mean that it bottoms with like this move. We didn't really see like massive volume to the downside like over here, but we saw an acceleration of price to the downside. We saw a pickup in volume. And then we also saw an undercut of the previous low here. So as we had this kind of volume capitulation, we set that low. I can actually draw that here. We undercut that low and then basically form a pivot around that undercut. Form the pivot into the 5-day moving average. And then, like I say, trends don't tend to switch and actually um, stay switched until you have a gap in the opposite direction. So this was all selling off. We did not have any gap ups. Finally, we got a gap up through this little pivot through the 5-day moving average on the 11th, followed by a second gap up just the next day. And then we have this resistance gap that I still have drawn here right around the 20-day EMA. And we get another gap up and close over that area. So three gap ups in a row after an undercut of the previous lows, a little pivot formed right at that undercut, and then tight action today. Now we get news that Berkshire took a position and it's up right around $300. So thinking it, like with that as a potential bottom for XLV, the biotech ETF, which is kind of healthcare adjacent, I think is catching a bid with that as well. So now that entire kind of group or theme is not as weak, potentially bottoming, and hopefully this leads to higher prices in biotech. A couple other themes: NLR, nuclear and uranium, right on that 20-day moving average. As nuclear stocks pull back, SMR, LEU, what else? CCJ, as that pulls back, uranium names are actually acting pretty well. UUU, wait, no, four U's. UU is a name that I'm watching on the long side. And then two others I wanted to cover. IGV, the software ETF, covered yesterday that I was hoping we get a gap up and run through to previous day's high. Fortunately, we did not get that. We got the opposite. We got a gap down and a close under the 50-day moving average again after attempting to get through the 20-day. And we did so on pretty big volume here. So this is still not completely falling apart, but a couple warning signs building up here. And then the other group to cover is cybersecurity, CIBR. Just another weekday gap down, close near the low of the day, back under the key moving averages. So you are getting that rotation away from tech, away from like the Nasdaq was slightly weaker than the S&P 500. I wonder if that trend is going to continue, but until we see a turnaround, like that's the trend that we're seeing. And then KWEB had some pretty bad reaction today, still above the 5-day moving average, but Alibaba, which is heavily owned in KWEB, had a pretty bad day. Sorry, let me get that up. Where it came back to the 10-day moving average on lighter volume than yesterday, but still, you want to see more follow through to the upside there. All right, jumping into the long setups for the day. First off is Tesla. This could have been bought today. I'm hoping we get one more test of the area. It probably won't now, but still watching that 10-day moving average and support gap low. Any more weakness here? If we go to a monthly chart on this, this has been kind of building a base for about 4 years now. We're really getting tight here. So back to the daily chart, just looking for a higher low pullback into that 10-day moving average. Even if we come down to the 200-day, like building a position around there and then using like a 3 or 4% stop is my plan of action on this one. Meta was buyable today at the HVC. We're just looking for another pullback into that high volume close from earnings. Uh, any further distribution, like coming into the 10-day moving average and support gap, that is also buyable versus the low of the pullback. Robinhood probably was like the buy point today. It didn't quite undercut the support gap and didn't get to the 20-day EMA. So I didn't take it with the size that I would want. I didn't take it at the price that I would really want to size it up. I kind of bought it back through the 10-day moving average, just like a smaller position to keep focused because I don't think that the market continues to go up without Robinhood. I still think it's one of the top like 3 to 5 stocks in the market. Hoping we get one more day of pulling back and undercut that support gap area and the 20-day moving average, then I would really try to size that up for like a bigger move. Uber, oops, needed to draw a little support gap here. Acting like Uber does, where it continues to chop around. And I've had way more success trading this on a pullback versus on strength. So you do have like a like 3-day pivot right at 92.20 area. I would rather buy this on an undercut of the support gap coming back through that zone. So like 90.50, undercut it, reclaim that area. That would be the buy point versus the low of the last 2 days and the 50-day moving average and $90 for some tighter risk reward. And again, I've just had more success buying Uber on undercut and rallies or pullbacks versus strength. SoFi, not doing anything wrong, looking for a pullback into that 10-day moving average and gap zone undercut. That would be the buy point versus the 20-day moving average. OKLO, in that nuclear theme that has been relatively weak, this has been the strongest stock. So if that theme is done pulling back, this has held up extremely well, holding that support gap, holding that 20-day moving average on a closing basis. We'd look for just a morning sell-off within the group, like a last kind of flush for the weaker names in the group. Flush this to the support gap. That reclaim would be buyable versus the low of the pullback. NBIS acting a little bit weak. Software themes have been weak, like we covered. Looking for this to pull back into the high volume close, into the 10-day moving average and the gap up zone low, right around $65 as a potential entry. Then stop would be the earnings gap up day low. RGTI, not a super clean entry point at this point, but the like this base is so clean. You see blue skyscrapers of volume being accumulated. Covered this yesterday, but they only had $1.8 million of revenue on their quarterly report that they just reported. So the stock can only report $1.8 million of revenue and not collapse. That's something that you need to focus on. When you see bad news come out, just like we saw with PPI and stocks get accumulated, that's not a trend that you want to fight until you actually see price coming back down. So because of such a big run up, such a quality base, and really surprising price action with bad news, I think this is a name that, as long as the market stays afloat, this can make a big move here. So it is down slightly with QUBT's earnings after hours. I would just be looking for like a pivot retest, a test of that 5-day moving average at 1690 versus today's low and the 10-day moving average as my stop. Wolf, WULF, massive volume today. I believe it was the highest volume ever. Um, we'll call it highest volume ever, but massive volume today, up 59.5%, closing above the previous resistance gaps here, which is awesome to see. Closed at the high of the day as well. This is one where if it gaps up and then comes back in the HVC, that's buyable for like a 2 or 3% stop and try to play that as just like a gap up, check back and go. These are the type of names that they tend to have good follow through on day two, and we're in the type of market that can really reward setups like this. So that's WLF. And then SYM, probably the one I'm least excited about, but it still has good potential. This was on the watch list yesterday as well. We had a gap down on earnings, but it got accumulated. And I just posted a couple stocks on X where they gap down, BE gap down, gets accumulated, and then runs. Gap down, gets accumulated today, and runs. And what was the other one? It was METC, METC. Gap down on earnings, accumulated around the 20-day moving average, and then it took off for what would that be? About a 25% move. So now SYM, we have a previous nice rally from $16 up to 63. We gap down, but instead of collapsing down, we get supported at all these support gaps. Close back over the 20-day moving average. We've got one kind of concerning candle here where we gap down and closed near the low of the day um, and under the 20-day moving average. But since then, we continue to see higher lows. And that's the spot that I would look for is just a pullback into that support gap right around 50.98 as potential add. Stop would be yesterday's low. I don't think, did I have SEDG on this? SEDG, the solar stock, it'll be a bonus one here. I haven't updated this chart in a little bit. Pretty ugly action on earnings, where it came back to the 50-day moving average, but instead of collapsing there, it's just kind of trading sideways while the solar ETF has pulled back. Pull back into that 50-day moving average and support gap is a spot that I would be watching versus the low here, but not like the most excited setup for me. Next to the short side, let's just go by price percent change because NEGG, what a monster stock. Really like it's making me kind of reconsider how I trade some of these stocks. And I haven't taken like large losses on NEGG trying to short it. I've shorted at really good spots, covered when I was proven wrong. And now this is getting crazy, crazy extended. I think someone said it was 25 times its ADR away from the 50-day moving average now, which is the most in the market. Has run from $3 up to $130 in just a couple months. Really, the buy point on this setup, well, for me, was as this gap down and then got really tight. Look at how light the volume was on the 23rd and the 24th. Virtually no volume. And then we gap up the next day, take out that zone at $32. That's as clean of a buy point that you can get. And I was short this name on this day at 36.38. And I said if we got back through that zone, that would be my stop. And I got stopped out. Instead of getting stopped out, I should have gotten stopped out and bought it because it's run from 32 up to 130 in 3 weeks. But now a little extended. We had the highest dollar volume ever today, which is, well, maybe not ever because I think this was a pretty popular stock in like 2000. But within this entire uptrend, uh, overall volume was lighter than the first move. But if you um, calculate it based on dollar volume, like the actual money moving into the stock. Today's, what was it, 2.8 million shares at $130 dwarfs the dollar volume of $10 million or 10 million shares at $14. That's the type of action that you want to look for in a blow off top. Multiple gap ups after a big extension and then see volume pick up. Looking for a little gap up, then a loss of VWAP or a green to red move as a short versus the high of the day. But like I've stressed multiple times, if you're going to be shorting these parabolic moves, you have to stay on the side of the VWAP. Meaning, if you enter as we break to the downside of the VWAP, great entry. If price comes back through that zone, it can squeeze higher and higher and higher. Like it's proven it can do that because it's done that from 11 up to $130. So if you're going to short it, I tried shorting it today as it came through VWAP. I immediately got stopped out as it came right back through. And I don't want to sit in a name that is squeezing and has the ability to squeeze higher. I want kind of the pressure on my side. So short on the VWAP loss, stop would be the high of the day or the VWAP, depending on how that shakes out. but getting just crazy extended here. And for anyone who is long this name at some of these points, congratulations. Awesome, awesome trade. ZEPP, kind of similar. I think this needs another day or two of like a gap and go, gap and go. It trades really cleanly, and we haven't seen the type of price action with NEGG where we had that tight price action and then two gap ups on big volume. Volume has picked up a little bit, but we haven't seen those gap ups just yet. So on a gap down, opening range break, I think that's shortable versus today's high. That's the only way I would really play this name, unless we get a gap up, ignite bar, gap up, ignite bar, and really like a blow off top through. Like I don't know, you pick the price where it goes, but I think this could be like if you're a day trader, I think this could be a long setup if we gap up, take out today's high, just like Newegg was. Next, we have RCAT. This reported earnings after the close. It was basically trading sideways last time I checked. Looking for this to have like a little rally into $10 into this resistance gap and then fail through that area. That would be my short versus wherever the high of the day is, or this like 1013 high on that name. Speculative name that it could get going too, like sure, but it just hasn't had the strength as a lot of the speculative names have. Hasn't made new highs since that December push. So we'll see if we can get a little uppercut and fail at the resistance gap up top. GEV, I think with the group weakening and people just still loving AI energy plays, which is again completely fair, monster move, right? Um, but if we lose today's low, I think that would be a quality short because this really does have in my eyes, probably has a date with the 50-day moving average and another base before it really can trend higher again. DMNR really stalling at that resistance gap. We see a huge pickup in volume as retail comes back into this name, but overall, this is a lower high into that resistance gap. Today, we had a little bounce, finished the day down 1%, sitting on the 5-day moving average. We're just looking for a flush through today's low and the 5-day as either an add spot to your short or a new short. Stop would be today's high. VVPR, this was a short on August 12th on the uppercut and fail of the resistance gap high. Since then, it's really just tracking how it puts in these local peaks where you get a little uppercut or like a little wick, then a red bar, some weakness or little gap down, rally, blue candle close. Now we're looking for the same type of action where we get a gap down, loss of today's low, and the 5-day moving average as a potential short versus today's high. QUBT, we had the strongest stock in the quantum name or quantum theme on the long side. We have the weakest name in the quantum theme on the short side. This is gapping down, at least last time I checked, on earnings. Let's go to the 5-minute bar. Yeah, trading right around $15 after hours right now. So right in this area. I'd look for just a mini rally in the morning, then a loss of VWAP to short this. And this is a name that still like looks okay here, but if we lose, and it seems like we're going to, if we lose today's low, this really looks like a lower high, a failure at the 50-day moving average, and is again one of the weaker names within that group. ZRRR gapped up today to start the day, rallied up, didn't even get to the 50-day moving average, then reversed and closed right on the low. This is one where I'd look for a little rally into that 20-day moving average and the 200-day right at 17.5. Coming back through those areas would be the short versus whatever the high of the day is. INOD, same kind of action. Looked like a kind of quality setup here, gapped up, had a nice run, but then on earnings, ugly action where we lost the 5, the 10, the 50 all in one day. Since then, just a relative weak drip lower, lower, lower. Today, gap down, lost the 50-day, or sorry, lost the 200-day moving average, and now this looks like a name that's kind of topping out on momentum. Another name that I'm just looking for a little uppercut of the 200-day moving average and fail right around 41.60. If this can continue to rally through and get to the 10-day moving average in this gap zone at 43.20, I think that's an even better spot to manage risk against versus yesterday's high, but I don't know if we'll get there. Then we did a bonus long setup. I just realized we could do a bonus short setup. MSTR, uh, just extreme relative weakness compared to Bitcoin, and potentially like Bitcoin had just had a false breakout. So a name that I already have a short position in, looking to add to it on any lower high bounce. This is a name that had a really good blow off top to study. This was my best trading day of my career on this blow off top, November 21st. Since then, we have not gotten back up to that high. We've continued to rally, and Bitcoin's already been at highs, but MSTR is not. We're under the 50-day moving average. We rallied back up and uppercut the resistance gap here, like to the penny, then had more relative weakness while Bitcoin was super strong. And then with Bitcoin's weakness today, we got a big gap down. Did close kind of middle part of the range, but I think that this could be like an actually like huge stage three top. Stage four, probably a couple weeks away, especially if Bitcoin can hold up. I think we probably get another rally up into this gap zone at 390, maybe even the 50-day moving average at 397. So no like clean entry point just yet, unless we rip tomorrow. But I'd rather like a slow rally back up to the gap zone to the 20-day and 50-day as a potential lower high to add to my short. So that is going to be the daily market recap for Thursday, August 14th. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want my market commentary throughout the trading day, along with the live stream at the market open, you can sign up for the Discord using the link below. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you guys in the next video.